JC foul upgraded to a flagrant 1. In judgment of the officials, the foul by Sheldon was unnecessary. The contact to Caitlin Clark's face. Furthermore, there was wind up and impact, and the contact to the face carries a potential for injury. Question: what went into deciding Marina should get a technical instead of something more severe like an ejection? She said the contact made by Mabry did not rise to the level.
The WNBA referees have finally released their official report on the Fever vs Sun game, and instead of clearing things up, they've exposed just how broken the entire system really is. This wasn't just disappointing, it was a full display of how corruption gets disguised as professional officiating. The refs answered the backlash, but what they delivered was a masterclass in deflection. Complete nonsense wrapped in official language, all while trying to paint themselves as the victims instead of the problem.
She said, Marina Mabry's technical foul from the Fever Sun game has been upgraded to a flagrant 2, the league told ESPN. A flagrant 2 comes from a standard fine. Additionally, Sophie Cunningham was fined separately for her hard foul with 40 seconds left to play. No players will be suspended. And a lot of fans were really upset about this because if Marina Mabry's foul during the game was called a flagrant 2, like it was upgraded to, then she would have been ejected during the game, and I don't think any of this stuff with Sophie and JC would have happened at the end of the game if the refs would have gotten control of the game much earlier on. And I do think if they would have ejected Marina Mabry during that whole play when she completely blindsided Caitlin, it wasn't a basketball play, it was after the whistle. If she would have been ejected at that point in time, I think it would have set the tone for the rest.
Let's be clear, what we're seeing here goes far beyond bad officiating. This looks like a systematic targeting of Indiana Fever players, and it's become so blatant, so impossible to ignore, that even the referee's own explanations can't cover it up anymore. If you're wearing an Indiana Fever jersey, especially if your name is Caitlin Clark, it feels like you're 10 times less likely to get a fair call. And that's not exaggeration, that's the reality fans are watching unfold right in front of them.
So Caitlin Clark gets poked in the eye, Marina Mabry doesn't even see what happens, and she just decides to clean Caitlin Clark out of it. And the referees just said, nah, it was not worth an injection. But now, in an update, it has been upgraded. It has been upgraded. So, she has now been upgraded to a flagrant 2. So basically, all they had to do was just eject her. All they had to do was eject her, and none of this happens. If the referees had ejected Marina Mabry, nothing else happens. The Sophie Cunningham situation does not happen.
So what did head referee Ashley Gloss have to say about this complete disaster of a game? Get ready for this one. The contact made by Mabry did not warrant an ejection. Furthermore, it did not meet the criteria for a flagrant penalty too. Seriously, are you kidding right now? Marina Mabry blindsided Caitlin Clark, knocked her to the floor from behind, after Clark had already been dealing with getting poked in the eye, and somehow that still doesn't deserve an ejection? That explanation doesn't just sound weak. It sounds completely detached from what everyone watching clearly saw.
Ejection. How the fuck does that not rise to a level of ejection? Can someone explain that to me? I think even in the NBA that might have been an ejection. I think both of them would have got ejected. She said additionally it did not meet the criteria for flagrant 1 foul penalty 2. So what does? Right? Question: why did Caitlin Clark get a technical foul? After the foul by Sheldon, Clark reached in an unsportsmanlike manner towards Sheldon. What type of sense? Yo, she got hit in the eye. In one angle, it looks like she got damn near punched. And then she trying to get up. She trying to get the girl off her. The girl attacks at her, and then Marina comes and knocks her down. That's crazy. So you gotta wait till something happens so the lead viewership could plummet for another.
But wait, it gets even worse. According to Ashley Gloss, Caitlin Clark was given a technical foul because she showed unsportsmanlike behavior toward JC Sheldon after getting her eye gouged. So let me get this straight. You get hit in the face on a basketball court, you react like any normal human being would, and somehow you're the one being punished? That's the level of backwards logic we're dealing with here. The player who gets hit is treated like the problem, while the actual contact gets brushed aside like it's nothing. That's not officiating, that's complete nonsense.
The logic is that Caitlin Clark deserves to have people kind of go at her because she's a trash talker. Okay, if that is the logic. But the media are now saying Caitlin Clark brings everything on herself. And by the way, Caitlin Clark, if you want to say JC Sheldon getting in her face and like everything until the eye gouge, nobody brings eye gouges on themselves. This is the same as, oh, she brings it on herself with the push-off. Just call the hand check and the push-off doesn't happen.
And here's the cherry on top. Sophie Cunningham gets ejected for a flagrant 2 the moment she decides to stand up for her teammate. But Marina Mabrey, after delivering what most reasonable people would call a blatant cheap shot, initially walks away with nothing more than a technical foul. Only after massive public backlash did they quietly upgrade Mabrey's foul to a flagrant 2. And even then, no ejection, no suspension, no real accountability. That's what makes this so hard to defend. The standards seem completely different depending on who's involved, and fans can see it clear as day.
They got it right at the end of the day, but why not get it right away? That is what most of us are talking about, man. There's no way y'all coming after the game and then now you're saying, oh, it should have been a flagrant 2. Oh, we should have. Look, you're catching the smoke and now you want to change it. You need to do it during the game. All right, during the game, go ahead and call it the way it is, man. Stop with the nonsense.
And if you're enjoying this, make sure to subscribe, because this is where it gets really interesting. And by interesting, I mean absolutely infuriating. The numbers don't lie, even when the referees try to. Caitlin Clark has reportedly absorbed 17% of all flagrant fouls in the league this season. Think about that for a second. One player accounting for nearly 1/5 of all flagrant foul situations across the entire WNBA. So either Clark is somehow the center of every dangerous play in league history, or, and here's the far more obvious explanation, opponents are targeting her and officials are letting far too much slide. Yet the refs want everyone to believe it's all just random coincidence. They expect fans to accept that the most skilled, most watched, and most marketable player in women's basketball just happens to take a disproportionate amount of abuse, and somehow that has nothing to do with officiating. That explanation gets harder to believe with every single game.
Detail what you mean by get control of the game, just to be in your words.
Get control of the game is call the fouls that are actually happening on the floor. Right, and consistently call the fouls that are actually happening on the floor. Okay, not just if somebody swings and misses, right? Consistently call the fouls.
Coach, do you think it's something pertaining to your team, or do you think this is a league-wide issue?
Well, I've seen quite a few dust-ups in the league so far, so I think it's a league-wide issue. I mean, bad officiating is bad officiating.
And then what did you make of Sophie Cunningham's flagrant foul on JC towards the end?
It was a flagrant foul.
Do you think it's like defending Caitlin or defending the team, or how do you view just how it all?
I view it as a flagrant foul.
That's about the game, too.
Yeah, well, I mean, you guys came for basketball.
Yeah,
Let's talk
seriously.
about basketball. Come on.
Stephanie White saw this coming from the very first quarter of that Sun game. She warned the officials that tensions were rising, that things were getting out of control, and that if they didn't step in, something bad was going to happen. And what did the refs do? Absolutely nothing. They ignored the warning, let the game spiral, and then acted surprised when everything finally exploded. Even the WNBA had to acknowledge that the referees lost control of the Fever Sun game and admitted there were officiating mistakes. Yet somehow the main disciplinary focus landed on Sophie Cunningham, the player defending her teammate, rather than on the actions that sparked the entire mess in the first place. That's what makes this so frustrating. And this isn't just about one game. Reports and complaints about WNBA officiating have become so frequent, so consistent, that it's starting to look less like isolated mistakes and more like a pattern that is hurting the quality of the league itself. But when you look at how often Indiana Fever seems to end up on the wrong side of these calls, it's hard not to feel like Indiana is carrying the heaviest burden of all.
It blows my mind how they can somehow get refs for the WNBA that can't control the game. Like, half of your job as a ref is to control the players, control the game, make sure things don't randomly get out of hand. And then you just watch things get out of hand and you're like, dude, this is gonna go so viral later. Like, I'm convinced that's what the refs were thinking last night during the Fever and the Sun game. Dude, this is gonna go so viral later. Cause like, they had no control over that. Absolutely no control over that game, dog. And at the end of the season last year, one of the things I said, like, I really hope changes in the W between last year and this year is that they get better refs that kind of actually give a shit and like know what they're doing. And they haven't done that. They still haven't done that.
The most damning part of this entire situation isn't just one bad call. It's the clear pattern of how different players are treated for similar actions. Marina Mabrey delivers a cheap shot that sends Caitlin Clark crashing to the floor and initially walks away with only a technical foul. Sophie Cunningham responds later with a hard, intentional foul meant to send a message, and she gets ejected immediately. Let's be honest about what happened. Cunningham's foul was deliberate, yes, But it was also the kind of reaction you see when officials completely lose control of a game. It was frustration boiling over after repeated missed calls and ignored warnings. She didn't make the kind of blindside dirty play that Mabry pulled on Clark. Yet somehow, in the referee's upside-down logic, Cunningham's action was treated as the greater offense. Even the broadcasters were calling it out live, openly blaming the officials and saying that if the refs had handled things properly earlier, none of this would have happened. When even the people calling the game can't believe what they're watching, that tells you everything. This wasn't just bad officiating, it was a failure of game management from start to finish.
She said no place in the game for what Sophie Cunningham did. What about what she didn't say shit about what the other two people did. She said no place in the game for what Sophie Cunningham did. That warrants further review and penalty from the lead. But you're not gonna review and penalize what Marina and the other.
Stephanie White deserves major credit for having the courage to say publicly what so many people were already thinking. In her post-game press conference, she delivered one of the sharpest critiques of WNBA officiating we've heard. Everybody's getting better except the officials. That wasn't just frustration, it was a direct shot at a system that many believe is failing players and teams. But White didn't stop there. She made it clear this wasn't about one single game, it was about an entire season of what she sees as inconsistent and unfair officiating against the Indiana Fever. The disrespect right now for our team has been pretty unbelievable, she said. And honestly, when your head coach has to spend post-game press conferences fighting for basic fairness instead of breaking down basketball, that says everything. She also exposed something even bigger, the so-called accountability system for officiating complaints. Teams are supposedly able to file grievances and raise concerns, but according to White, it feels like that system leads nowhere. When she said she doesn't really feel like the system works, she was essentially calling out the entire league for having an accountability process that looks good on paper but delivers very little in reality. That's the kind of statement that hits far beyond one game. It challenges the credibility of the whole structure.
Every year when we have our league meetings in the fall and in the spring, we say the same thing over and over and over. And nothing has changed. So, I'm not sure outside of continuing to submit clips, continuing to talk about it. Like, look, their job is hard. Their job is hard. Their job is hard, right? Their job is hard. The game has changed so much. Players are faster, they're better, they're bigger, they're stronger. They're as good as they've ever been. They're as athletic as they've ever been. The game is fast now. Things are happening quickly. Everybody's getting better, except the officials.
After all the criticism, after all the video evidence, and after being called out by fans, coaches, and analysts across the country, what did the WNBA actually do? They admitted there was an officiating error and acknowledged that the refs lost control of the game. Wow, how generous. They only admitted the obvious after being backed into a corner by overwhelming backlash. But here's the real issue. The only major disciplinary action seemed to land on Sophie Cunningham, the player defending her teammate. Marina Mabry gets fined, the moment passes and life moves on. That sends a loud message to fans, that if you play for the Indiana Fever, you may be judged by a completely different standard than the rest of the league. The league says the investigation is still ongoing, but fans have seen this movie before. A vague statement about improving officiating standards, maybe a quiet referee reassignment, and then business as usual. No real accountability, no meaningful change, just the same frustrations repeating themselves while trust in the system keeps getting worse.
So it's really people out here defending Marina Mabry for Madden hit sticking Caitlin Clark to the floor, saying that she's just protecting her teammate. For one, it involved Caitlin Clark and JC Sheldon. They had their little spiel before that, and then JC Sheldon scratches Clark in the face, then invades her space after that. Clark pushes her away because of that, and then Marina Mabry comes get involved, and Madden hit sticks her to the floor, man, and y'all just like she was protecting her teammate. But then Sophie Cunningham is getting called vile and disgusting for dropping JC Sheldon to the floor and dragging her by the hair. So Sophie Cunningham can't stick up for her teammate, or else it's vile and disgusting. But Marina Mabry could get involved in something that didn't involve her, and it's just she was protecting her teammate. The Caitlin Clark hate is so forced.
Let's ground this in what can be verified rather than turning it into a narrative of corruption, because that claim goes further than the available evidence supports. Sophie Cunningham has indeed been involved in physical, high-intensity situations where she's responded aggressively to contact. and in basketball those kinds of retaliatory or escalation fouls are often judged more harshly by officials. That's not unique to her or to the Indiana Fever. It's how officiating rules are structured across the sport. Intent, timing, and escalation after a stoppage or after the play can turn a basketball foul into a flagrant or an ejection. Where things get more complicated is perception. Fans tend to see a sequence like, a star player like Caitlin Clark gets hit, then a teammate responds and only the response gets punished. That feels inconsistent in real time, especially in emotional games where earlier contact wasn't penalized to the same level. But that doesn't automatically mean officials are allowing targeting or selectively enforcing rules against one team. It more often reflects how referees separate initial contact, retaliation, and game control decisions under pressure. In most officiating frameworks, Cunningham's type of foul, a retaliatory or demonstrative message foul, is actually the easiest category to penalize harshly because it escalates risk and signals loss of control. That's why those actions can lead to ejections even if earlier physicality in the game wasn't handled as strongly as fans expected. So the real tension here isn't a proven coordinated bias, it's the gap between what fans perceive as unanswered contact earlier in the game, and how officials are trained to immediately punish escalation afterward. That gap is what fuels most of the frustration around games like this.
Petition to ban her. 181 people think that Sophie Cunningham should be banned from the WNBA for misconduct. Are you kidding me? We used to see something more intense than that every night in the NBA when I was a kid. What Sophie Cunningham did, man, honestly, maybe it's just too intense for you. Maybe you need another hobby. Maybe you should collect stamps rather than watch sports if you think what Sophie Cunningham did was out of line. And I assume that those are butthurt Connecticut Sun fans. I don't expect Caitlin Clark to get preferential treatment at all, but I expect her to get equal treatment to everybody else in the league. It cannot be open season on the face of the league any longer.
I get why people get worked up watching moments like this, but a few parts of your framing go beyond what we can actually support with evidence or how officiating works in practice. First, referees don't use language like assault or evaluate intent in the way fans do. They apply rule categories: illegal contact, escalation, retaliation, and unsportsmanlike conduct, and then decide whether it rises to a personal foul, flagrant 1, flagrant 2, or ejection. On a dead ball or off-ball situation, what matters most is severity, timing, and perceived risk, not just whether contact looks harsh in isolation. So when officials say a play did not meet the threshold for ejection, that's not them saying it was fine. It's them saying it didn't cross the highest disciplinary bar under the rule definitions. You can disagree with that threshold, and many fans do, but it's not a ruleless decision. Second, on the technical foul point, unsportsmanlike conduct in basketball can include things like demonstrative reactions, prolonged confrontation, or actions judged to escalate the situation. Even if a player feels justified emotionally, referees are trained to penalize reactions that could trigger further conflict. That's why you often see reaction fouls punished even when the initial contact is also controversial. Third, the claim that Caitlin Clark is receiving nearly 20% of all flagrant fouls in the league is not something that's been confirmed through official league-wide public tracking in that form. It's a stat that's been circulated in commentary spaces, but without standardized league reporting context, it's not reliable enough to use as proof of systemic targeting. What is fair to say is this: physicality in games involving Clark and the Indiana Fever has been widely debated. Fans and analysts often disagree with how quickly escalation is or isn't penalized. And officiating transparency and consistency is a recurring criticism across the WNBA, not just one team. But jumping from controversial or inconsistent calls to proof of deliberate targeting or corruption goes further than what the evidence can actually establish.